And you ask me what I want this year, and I try to make this kind and clear. Just a chance that maybe we'll find better days. 'Cause I don't need boxes wrapped in strings and designer love and empty things. Just a chance that maybe we'll find better days. So take these words and sing out loud, 'cause everyone is.
Winston Churchill gave a speech in Fulton, Missouri in 1946, and in that speech his ideas based the idea for the Iron Curtain. And what that was the Soviet Union, after World War II, made an Iron Curtain to seal off itself and its dependent Eastern and Central European allies from open contact with the West and other non-communist areas. On June 5, 1947, Secretary George C. Marshall announced a plan to provide economic assistance to the devastated nations of Europe after World War II. President Truman hoped the plan would encourage both political and economic stability to Europe. By August, representatives from Europe had proposed a plan of $20 billion over the course of 4 years. The Truman administration turned this amount to $17.8 billion, and President Truman insisted that Marshall gets the credit not only because he deserved it, but because he wanted to distance himself from the plan. By the time the Marshall Plan ended in 1952, it had provided more than $13 billion of aid to Europe.
I need someplace simple where we could live, and some.
From June 24th, 1948 to May 12th of 1949, the Soviet Union blocked the Western Allies' railway, road, and canal access into Berlin. They did this to gain control over the city of Berlin. So in response, the Western Allies created the Berlin Airlift, and this is when the United States and the UK organized their flights to carry in supplies via airplanes over the city. And over the next year, they had over 200,000 loads of cargo with food and fuel into the city. So, realizing that they had failed, the Soviet Union lifted the Berlin blockade, and it was lifted in May 1949, and this created the separation of the German states.
And that's faith and trust and peace while we're alive. And the one poor child who saved this world, and there's 10 million more who probably.
NATO, it's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It is a military alliance based on the North Atlantic Treaty, which was signed April 4th, 1949. With this, the Cold War led to a rival with the nations of the Warsaw Pact. The first NATO Secretary General was Lord Ismay, who started the organization in 1949. The goal of the organization was to keep Russia out, the Americans in, and the Germans down.
If we all just stopped and said a prayer for them. So take these words and sing out loud.
The space race was a competition between the Soviet Union and the United States to see who could launch their first rocket into space. The Soviet Union launched their first rocket into space in 1957. It's called Sputnik. But they never made it to the moon or anything like that. The Apollo 11, which the U.S. launched in 1969, was the first spacecraft to land on the moon. And the basis for it was they were proving that if they can send rockets into space and a bunch of equipment up there, then why can't they send nuclear bombs?
Everyone is forgiven.
started the night of August 13, 1961. The East German government began to close the border, and most of it was closed overnight. A second wall was built in June of 1962 in order to prevent escaping to the west.
Begins again.
The Cuban Missile Crisis happened in October 1962. In August 1962, the United States tried to overthrow the Cuban regime, like with the Bay of Pigs and Operation Mongoose. After that, the Cuban and Soviet governments secretly began building bases on Cuban soil for nuclear missiles. This almost made the Cold War become a nuclear conflict.
On November 9th of 1989, the border separating Western from Eastern Germany was opened. The government said that East Berlin citizens could now visit into West Berlin. Crowds began to climb on the wall from both sides in celebration. Over the next few weeks, they began to chip away at the wall, and later the government used industrial equipment to completely remove the rest of it.
Crunch and show as the sweet breeze blows, as the kindness goes, hope still lingers on. I drink myself a newfound pity, sitting alone in New York City, and I don't know what. All the words that I've been reading have now started the act of